And now here's part 2 of our episode. It's kind of a raw recording, isn't it? It's not very polished. I like that about it.
Yeah, it could be a live track if you're closing your eyes and you don't know.
Yeah. I also love the little like flute. I mean, it's so. I mean, the Motown influences are obvious all over this whole album, but like that little flute pops in, and
it's
just
flute.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's there's this little like moment, this delightful moment amidst like this. I don't even know if I would say that she's like angry in the song or she's just upset or I don't know. It's just sort of
it's
Amy
just
Winehouse's voice. It's just what irked.
Yeah, like that's what I love about it too. Is so much of this album is I am struggling. This relationship almost broke me, and then you get to this song and it's like, man, your boyfriend smoked my weed. Like, don't do that. Like, it's just. It has a nice, like, the frustration isn't coming from an internal pain source. And so you're like, okay. It's got that lightness.
That's a really interesting way of putting it. Yeah, like she is in a lot of the lyrics and a lot of her work, it seems like so much of her conflict in life comes from outside of her, but I don't know. We do both things, I think, and when we look at her with hindsight, right? We look at her like internal demons, like the addiction and all that kind of thing. But we also see how she was taken advantage of. So looking at her music as a way of identifying the external sources of conflict in her life, I think that's really instructive. You're going to get a bunch of points for that. 6,000 points for that.
6,000. I feel like I'm on Who's Line with these points. It's great.
You are not the first person to make that comparison. Something I heard this time through that I guess I hadn't was just the line, "It's got me addicted. It does more than any dick did." And the fact that the fact that this song doesn't have the little explicit warning on it, it's like Spotify. You didn't catch that.
Yep.
I also love there's another song on the album, Me and Mr. Jones, where I think she starts the whole song out by saying, "What kind of fuckery is this?"
They tried to title it Fuckery. They tried really hard, and then someone on the album was like, "You can't title it Fuckery," and they were like, "Why not?"
Oh my gosh.
I'm team Fuckery. I would have been like, "Nah, let's just do it."
I think we could transition into why you chose this album as a perfect album. One of the things we like to ask are like, when we gave you the prompt, and as some people who have been on the pod before know, we ask you for a few different options, right? We ask you for four albums. What were the standards of perfection that you were using to make that list of 4 albums, and why does this album meet those criteria?
That's a great question. I think for me, a lot of what makes a perfect album, as opposed to like a perfect single, because I'm a singles girl. I really love pulling a track from an album, sticking it in a playlist, wearing it to death. But a perfect album has that narrative, has a story you can follow. There's a reason you want to listen to the album in its completeness, and because you're getting something. I think singability was also a really big one for me, and why I went with, I think, Amy over my other 2 choices. I was playing the albums in my kitchen, trying to figure out what I wanted to do and which one I wanted to pick. And, when I had Back to Black on in the house, I live with 6 people. So every time someone would come in, they would sing along. Didn't matter who they were. We have a lot of different ages, races, gender, identity expressions in the house. And it was so cool to just be like, oh yeah, this is like, not only was it an instant classic when it came out, it just has this really timeless effect, I think, on, at least people in my age range and tax bracket and people who I hang out with. Can't speak for everybody, but to see that that universal quality of it just like coming out even in your kitchen is like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, and it was one of those albums where it had really popular acclaim and regular people liked it, but then it also had a ton of critical acclaim from the Grammys and from other foundations. And Prince, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Prince did a cover of it. Like,
if he does it, then we generally we are a pro Prince. We're a pro Prince podcast. So he is a seal of approval.
Such a litmus test for wow, this is a big deal. This is happening.
Absolutely. It was the same thing with us and Janelle Monáe. Like when we found out the connection Janelle Monáe and Prince had, we were like, well, that just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. It all ties together in the end.
I agree that this album has aged really well, and that it really holds up today. And I wanted to know what do you think it is about this sound that has staying power? Is it the jazziness? Is it the simplicity of the instrumentation? Like, what do you think makes people our age and even kids younger than us really still connect to this album all these years later?
Mm-hmm. I think it has moving power in the sense that, it has all of these influences from the 50s and 60s, but then you sort of see this lyrical bluntness that came out more in the 80s and 90s. And it just it literally has momentum as an album to sort of propel it to the future, because we're already used to sort of hacking and remixing and revisiting these different sounds from the past. So I think because, it has this classic feel to it, but it has lyricism that is more modern, that does relate to a modern zeitgeist a lot better. Even if that zeitgeist starts to become less and less modern as the album ages, I think it has enough of that, eternal feel. People are going to be sad forever. People are going to be sad forever. And I think that is also, a huge staying power is, you can be seen by this album at many different points in your life, at many different ages. And it'll ring differently. And I think that's really special with it too.
You said earlier about the song "Addicted," like she's irked. She's not like super pissed, not super angry. And I think about like all the performances I've seen that she's given. I was always struck by how I don't want this to sound like this is negative at all, but I always felt like when she's performing, there's a detachment. There was a kind of a distance in some ways. Like the voice was all there, but like if you sort of watch the way she moved on stage and the way she emoted, it seemed like something for me I always felt like didn't quite sync up in some ways. Did you ever have that same experience, or for you was that part of the story?
Absolutely, I had that experience, thinking about, I am someone who performs, who sings while I perform. Thinking about the way you engage with an audience is so paramount, I think, in the way that I approach performing. So to see that not happening, I think it just ultimately led me to, okay, why is that not happening? And I think, as I learned more and more about her life, music was such a personal journey too. And I think at the end of the day, sometimes, especially towards the end of her life, she didn't want to be touring. She wanted to be making new music. She wanted to, hang out and collab with the Tribe Called Quest. She wanted to, just sit and write and sing and make music in a little bar. And so I think performing really became a source, like a place to put a lot of that pressure and sort of nemesis on like, oh, I have to perform. And so I think that dejection or that detachment, was a preservation tool for sure in terms of like, I simply do not want to be here. If I connect, it might look, fake, or I just don't have the energy for it. And I get that. The sad clown effect is hard. That's like a very bleak, when I'm having a really hard day and I have to like go to work and put on a bad accent and like have so much energy and be so like friendly and engaging, and I like have to go and like take a nap. Like I can't pretend to be relatable for that long.
The social hangover is real.
Yeah, not even social. I do love, kikiing. I love being a social butterfly, but if I'm not in the space to do it and I have to, it just it's an energy sucker for sure.
Absolutely. I think she's like really has it makes me think about the fact that she probably would have been, even if she would have never hit, right? If she would have never like had a break or something like that, she would have been singing in bars in Camden, like her whole life. And then she would have just been one of those amazing people that, you get to encounter in a bar, you get to encounter in a small town, that has the connection. I love what you said about the direct channel from her soul to her voice. Like it makes you think about all the people out there who never have this break and never have this global exposure, but have that, have that that ability to emotionally express themselves. That is, that we all crave it, right? Like we're all just so hungry for it.
And to see it on such a large stage, it's like, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I think about often with her wanting to stay in that small space. Oh, it's so sad. The night she won, 4 or 5 Grammys was the same night that her hometown bar in Camden, the one that she sang at all the time, literally burned to the ground. Like Camden was in flames as she was winning. And it's like, talk about one door opening and the other one just like slamming behind you. and sort of that way that it can just sort of isolate and go into yourself when you feel like you have nowhere to turn to.
She was brave. She was an incredibly brave woman, and I think that I feel so. It hurts, right? It hurts to see somebody. It hurts to see somebody be so broken down by the forces swirling around them, taking advantage of what they have going on in them. Just had to say that. It's heartbreaking.
That documentary made me very angry. Like just watching that, and just because it's. I mean, I know that since the documentary has been released, her father has come out and said that he's portrayed in a bad light. But I'm kind of like, the filmmaker. The filmmaker has. But there's so many instances within the documentary where it's like, okay, but how do you explain away all of these things here? I mean, like when they go, was it the Bahamas or Bermuda or somewhere? In
St. Thomas, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And they go there for a while, and there's vacationers there who take want photos with her, and she kind of says like, why are you here? Why did you bring this film crew here? I just wanted to get away for a while, and you brought this film crew. Like it's just, I don't know. I think there's something. There are certain artists out there, certain musical artists, that there's something so unique about their voice that it like hits it. You can hear the pain within it, but yet there's also a beauty in that. And like no one else sounds exactly the way that Amy Winehouse sounded. And maybe that's part of why she got to be as famous as she was. But it's just, I don't know. I just now whenever I hear musical artists where you can hear the pain in their voice, I want to call up their managers and say, are they seeing a therapist? Like I want to be like, are you taking care of the person, not just the property or the product?
So I mean, such a staying problem. I mean, I think about artists like Megan Thee Stallion and Kesha and all these people who have really brutal relationships with their management, with people who produce their music. I mean, it's a problem that hasn't, gone away. It's just really changed forms over the years.
This has come up a few times in our conversation here, and I feel like it's such a cool way of sort of expressing how how you create now in your life. Do you feel like, and you've talked about how you see the similarities in your sort of like background, and you see the sort of similarities in your voices, literally, and the way the way that you look, the way that you move through the world emotionally. Like, what do you think are the things about Amy Winehouse's artistry that you see yourself folding into your work the most?
I think a lot of it is her bravery to sort of face these darker places or face these darker aspects of her life and what's going on. And again, sort of like, resignation is very sad, but it is, a form of acceptance, at least physically. It's a relief that you can give your body. And I think thinking about that as it relates to my work, I think comes up a lot. It's sort of, yes, I am being vulnerable in my work. Yes, I am, digging to a lot of dark places to bring this up. But, I want to ultimately show that like I am still, I'm still here, and I'm a conduit for that. And I'm, a vessel so that other people can see that and have that experience. And I think a lot of that gets taken in. And of course, it's always, it's a warning. It's so crazy how on like a micro scale, all of these issues still like can be very persistent. Like we are, in the ensemble, we joke that we're Santa famous because it is a very small town, and like low key, I can't go to the grocery store anymore without getting recognized. And so like it does, and like just the way that, as an artist who, does things that are a bit more on the extreme side in terms of vulnerability, people think they know you really well. You show your ass and titties in a play, and suddenly everyone's like, oh, I know everything about you. And I'm like, girl, like, no,
you just know my ass and titties.
Exactly. But I mean, we've even started to navigate people trying to get close to people in the ensemble romantically, and then sort of slowly seeing like, oh, I don't know if you actually like me. I think you like the proximity it like gives you to my work. And that's happened to multiple people in the ensemble. And so that's how I know it's real, and so weird to see on such a small scale. I mean, even thinking about her relationship like with her dad. I love my dad. We're very chill, but I do also work for my dad. I'm his graphic designer. And so sometimes, like, I won't have personal conversations with him for like months because the only time he talks to me is when he like needs a graphic done.
Sure.
And that's fine. I don't think
boundaries.
I don't think it's a total reflection of our relationship, but I'm like, why is it that you are always so responsive and reaching out to me when I'm, of service to you? And I think a lot of people treat me that way in terms of what I can service them, what I can give to them, be it an emotional escape through performance or, getting to feel something or see something that they don't normally get to do. Or it's like a literal transaction of, I am creating a design for you. I'm helping you get this job. I'm blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So trying to reckon with, not being just this like talent, this thing that can be expelled and then, potentially exploited.
Right.
I think is a warning tale.
I feel like that's a thing that everyone wrestles with in adulthood, is this idea. And like, you sort of see Amy Winehouse struggle with it. The fact that like, once you get out of school and you have to, make money and you have to focus on a career or whatnot, that like, it's really easy to lose sight of the personal connections, if only because you A, don't have time to do so, but also B, you just sort of forget how to do that. Like, when you're 7 and you're running around and you're like, ooh, I'm going to go play with my friends. Or like, even when you're in college and you're like, I don't want to do work. I want to hang out with my friends because they understand who I am. I feel like myself when I'm with them. I mean, not to sound like old grandpa here on the podcast, but like, that's something I'm still sort of yearning for in my adulthood, is that sense that reminder of who I am that comes from just hanging out with people. Just being and around people who know me well, where I don't have to perform, I don't have to make anything, I don't have to work. And yet I'm also someone who fills my life with work because I feel like that needs to be my sense of purpose. But now we're going down a whole psychotherapy road. So I'm gonna step away from that.
You're striking a chord. It's when the work is created, when it is fulfilling in that way, it's like, well, I don't have as much of a justification for stopping, for slowing down, because it's like, well, so many people want this, or, it is such an outlet for personal expression, but that doesn't make it not work.
Yeah,
exactly. There's a great book. There's a great book I read a couple years ago, and maybe I've already talked to you about it, Michael, but I'll say it again on the podcast. And then Gracie, I'll share it with you too, called Work Won't Love You Back by Sarah Jaffe. And I loved that book. And, it's very much in the vein of a lot of literature I've been steeping myself in the last few years. But that idea of creativity becoming work and becoming part of your, becoming part of your using your creative energy, which we all are given, right? I believe at least that we're all imbued with some beautiful divine creative energy that we get to share with the world. But that becoming the source of your income and your livelihood does change the terms of things. It does make it so that your relationship with that creative energy fundamentally has to change. And you can see it in what Amy brought, and you can see it in all the hats that you wear, Gracie. I mean, like the way that you hustle and you have all your different hats and are leveraging your creativity to create a life for yourself is like, it's amazing. And being your friend and looking at it from afar, you're like, wow, look at all this myriad ways that she is sharing her creative energy with the world. And I'm like, I hope she sleeps sometimes too.
I'm getting good. I'm getting better. Good. At sleep. But yeah, I mean, it's sad, especially I think I'm in a period right now where I'm taking on a lot of responsibility at work, which is really exciting. But I've really noticed that I just have no motivation or time really for my personal practice as a photographer. I just when I scrub away everything else I'm doing, I'm like, what kind of images do I want to create? And I'm like, I don't really know. And I actually don't feel entertained to think about it right now. I want to be able to put down a plate or two to really give that focus to whatever I'm working on or, whatever role I'm fulfilling at the moment. Because I think you need to, especially as someone who does a lot of different things, I think letting some of those levers kind of fall at different moments. Tech week, I'm like, I'm not doing anything else except for whatever show I'm doing right now. And if you need something, cool, hit me up next week.
Yeah.
And just really allowing myself those periods.
You have to.
Okay, that's quiet. That's dormant. That's fine.
See, if only Amy and the people around her had this perspective,
right. You might still have it.
Yeah.
I know.
To pivot to a slightly lighter line of questioning that I like to do.
Sorry.
No. This is exactly what we want. This is and I think this is, to be frank, this is she is worthy of this kind of conversation, because she was a singular voice, and it is you in the documentary you hear it a lot. People saying she could have had one of the greatest voices of all time. And probably does. But you mentioned about when you were screening albums for your to potentially bring on the podcast, that you listen to this in the kitchen, and it's a beautiful striking image of you and your 6 roommates, which is crazy, by the way. You and your 6 roommates jamming in the kitchen to Back to Black, which I think is a beautiful way to experience this album. We like to ask people, what is this album perfect for? It sounds like it's perfect for the kitchen with a bunch of your friends, but are there any other situations that this album is just perfect to put on for?
Well, personally, nostalgically, it's perfect for getting ready for high school.
Very good. Yes.
With the mid flip. If your hair's not done by the time you need to flip the record, like, get moving, girl. That is bad. So definitely definitely a cold room above a garage that's painted an ugly color that shall not be seen again.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
I'll tell you, I don't think it's ideal for cars, because it's, especially for me, like, if I start singing like that, I'm not paying attention to the road, and I really need to focus. Yeah. Santa Fe is, you guys, it's geriatric. These are the worst drivers in the country. No doubt in my mind. Not a doubt in my goodness. Mind. So the road requires some serious attentive care. But I think that's what I do love about this album, is that it does fit into a lot of different listening environments. Like, could you put it on at a cocktail hour? Sure. Can you put it on when you're folding laundry? Sure. Can you put it on when you can't get out of bed? Not the most recommended time to do it, but absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of how it depends on your relationship to music. And like some people, if they're sad, they're like, all right, Phoebe Bridgers, I'm getting in the tub. Like, everybody shut up. I'm going to be sad. And I'm going to like really, like just like marinate in that sadness to get through it.
Lean into it.
Yeah. And some people don't. So I would say, I think your own relationship to your mental health and to your mistakes and to the way you handle guilt and shame, I think really reflects the times in which it's best for you to listen to this album, if you're not someone who listens to it all the time. Another reason why I really love Addicted, because that song can come on anywhere and I'm like, yup, turn it up.
We've had lots of conversations on this about the albums that go to both ends of the spectrum when it comes to mental health. Like do you want to listen to 9 Inch Nails' A Downward Spiral, or do you want to listen to Lizzo? Like, which one do you want?
You got to have both.
Totally valid ways of, getting through the day. But yeah, so I would say, sexy jazzy is probably like fun.
Yeah.
Probably not if you're like on a date trying to impress somebody.
Though it would be a very good litmus test for a date. Like, say you were cooking dinner for somebody and you put on Amy Winehouse and you see how they talk about Amy Winehouse, then you're going to find out a lot about that person.
That is really true, because she is just, she's someone who I think is due so much respect and received so much more criticism and attention than what we were used to, because Back to Black came out 4 months before anyone who was 13 and older with an email account could join Facebook. So like Back to Black was one of our first, seriously. And, it was one of those first experiences where everyone was, online in a new way and engaging, with celebrities in a new way. And they were like, whoa, I can be way more, honest, and my opinion can get further. And of course, that's going to have a negative trajectory as much as it has a positive one.
That is wild that you just identified that she was really a social media era cusp, is what she was. She
when we were learning.
We hadn't become so inundated with this social media cycle. But if she would have lived, I mean, I guess she passed away in 2011, right? So she was there for the first part of it. But man, she was living in an era before we have this sort of rhythm that we have now.
Absolutely.
And I do want to give you 9,000 points for talking about how this is a great album to sort of reflect on your relationship with your mistakes and guilt and shame. And because it is, there's really, you can sense it in her. You can sense that she feels guilt, but also that she's sort of like trying to bounce back from it. She's trying to say, no, but I'm still confident. I still believe that I deserve
I won't let
space.
that be me.
Yes, 100%.
I think that's probably what drew me to her initially was, just how different a song like I'm No Good is, especially when you compare it to everything else that's in the top 40. I'm like, oh, I can, not only can I make mistakes, but I can talk about them, but I can, share this in a way that helps me get through it. And I was like, that's cool,
Gracie Meier, Amy Winehouse. Amazing combination. Love those two names right next to each other. And then we're going to see those two names. We're going to go to the board here, and we're going to just review the points that you got, because the points are made up, but the points do matter. Here on this one goes to 11. I'm going to start. No, not competitive at all. I am going to start with the most recent points I gave you. That was 9,000 points for talking about how this album is a great vehicle for reflecting on your relationship to your mistakes and the guilt and shame you feel for whatever it might be. Totally true. I gave you. I didn't want to interrupt you, so I gave you 8,000 points for saying that you and the Exodus Ensemble are Santa famous, because that's great. 6,000 points for talking about how this album expresses something about her internal and external sources of irksomeness, is how I translated your point there. Irksomeness, right. 2,000 points for talking about how she has a direct channel from her soul to her voice. She absolutely does. It's beautiful. 900 points for Gracie needing to be in a Blondie cover band. So those are sort of like preliminary points. I'm going to expect when we next see you, you better be in a Blondie cover band.
I'll do karaoke. Maybe I'll try to get a Blondie night going.
Let's do that. I'll roll through Santa Fe. I'll see a show, and then we'll do a Blondie karaoke night. Yeah.
This is such a tangent, but we're really trying to, because there's a lot of us in the ensemble, so we do have power in numbers when we go out. We're really trying to do an all Nickelback night at karaoke, and just sign up as a group, only doing Nickelback songs over and over again, just to see if we can do it.
Let's do it.
That sounds like a personal hell. I'm sorry, not because of you singing Nickelback.
No, Michael, it's camp. Okay, it's camp. It will be fun. I will slay Rockstar. That's the thing. We have enough vocal chops that I think it'll be a little entertaining.
Wow. Okay, you just made a really important point. The Nickelback is camp. I do. Yeah. When did they become camp? But they totally did.
I think it was around whatever time that meme came out where they cut
look at this photograph.
They took out photo, and it's just a graph that goes, look at this graph. They tuned down the song a couple octaves. I think it was around that time. I was like, now I know what we're doing with Nickelback. That was the turning point. That was the turning point. Amazing. You had a few more points on the board. I gave you 600 points for you describing the first turntable you had that also had a cassette deck and an iPod docking station, which is so early aughts. It's almost painful. So good. Almost painful. My red Nano.
Your red iPod Nano. You had 76 trombones for the Gracie Meier's signature trombone, and you gave Michael 3.5 James Beard Awards for his 60-second intro to Amy Winehouse and Back to Black.
And I'd do it again. Excellent board.
This is an excellent board. I think your case has been well made. We obviously have a lot of love for Amy and for her memory. So I put it to you, my friend Michael Osinski. You've heard the case that Gracie Meier made.
Sure have. We've
reflected on the power and the staying power specifically of Amy Winehouse in this album. Tell me, does Back to Black by Amy Winehouse go to 11? Is it a perfect album?
I agree. It certainly is.
Oh,
no nice. Deliberation necessary. Case has been made.
Hey, that was fast. Love that.
Yeah, it's like when the jury just walks out and they walk right back in. Right?
All right.
We're good. We know it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for bringing this album to us. It's been such a joy to have you on.
Thank you.
So excited for all of the myriad activities you have going on, and can't wait to support them. Everybody, give Gracie a follow, because she's constantly, a constant source of joy and entertainment on your feed, and can't recommend that enough. But we need to share our standout track from the album. Michael, what did we choose as our standout track?
We picked Tears Dry on Their Own. And we debated about it a little bit, because I think something we haven't talked about too much like really explicitly. It's just the sort of Motown influence. I mean, we've talked about like girl groups and whatnot. I don't think we've spoken about it very, very specifically, but this song in particular does bear a resemblance to a more recognizable song or two, but
a certain one, yeah,
yes, but I don't know. I think we kind of wanted to pick something that wasn't one of the singles per se, since everyone knows certain songs, and I don't know something about. I'm a sucker for a good chord progression, and there's a progression on this one in the rising chords in the refrain. I don't know. That's for me. I don't know, Tyler, if you had any other reasons for picking this one.
No, yeah, I think you hit most of them. It's just really you see a lot of her influence in it. You see how tight this album is. Like I think this is a really good expression of the tightness and how well produced the album is. So they really, in a lot of ways, created a great container to show off her talents in this, and I think this song does that. Any thoughts on Tears Dry on their own, Gracie?
Love Baby Mark Ronson. Love him getting to show his stuff.
Yes.
This is, I think, another great example of, it is such a Motown influence, like has such a swing, that little bridge that makes you just like want to absolutely stomp your feet and run around. But then you look at the lyrics and it's like, how does it start? It's like, all I could ever be to you is a darkness that we knew. I think it's like, and this I regret something. And I'm like, oh my, like, wow.
Bleak.
And here I am just like in my kitchen, like, he walks on it. Like, who cares? So again, it has that amazing staying power that if you stop and listen to it, you're like, oh my God, yeah, I feel that.
It hits you. It hits you completely differently. Gracie, thanks so much. It's been great to see you.
Thank you. This is so fun.
Everybody, this is Tears Dry on Their Own by Amy Winehouse. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next week.